dreams coming true while I'm staring at the world through my rear view. See, I'm seeing nothing but my dreams coming true while I'm staring at the world through my rear view. They got me staring at the world through my rear view. Go and baby, scream to God, he can't hear you. I can feel your heart beating fast, guess it's time to die. Getting high, watching time fly.
Hi there. This is Rearview TV channel, where we talk about all sorts of things that we feel you should most definitely know in today's era. This information will leave you questioning whether what you was taught in school is a fact or a fiction or just a lie overall. However, this channel is just for informative purposes only, and we would suggest you to do your own research. Please join our community. Like, share, and comment if you wish, but most of all subscribe to stay updated. All of us have grown up to trust and believe what we have been educated within the Western academics systems for many years. However, on our channel we find the missing parts of our history that matters, history that is not being taught in the Western classrooms. We start this video off with talking about the life of Christopher Columbus. There has been research that Christopher Columbus is a black man and not white as we all know him to be. Let's find out if this information is true or not. Stick with us to the end of this video, to determine whether what we have been told of Christopher Columbus is true or not. Let's find out what really happened. Many black explorers and black travelers made and left a mark in history, and quite a lot of people don't realize this. People such as black travelers who traversed the continents out of necessity, curiosity, pilgrimage, and sometimes a mix of these. When they say explore, we probably think of Christopher Columbus, the white version. But don't be fooled, there were also black explorers who played a big and most important role in our world we know it today. All our black ancestors have been forgotten or removed from history and ignored, so could it be true that Christopher Columbus was a black man? To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised, but let's find out before we make any assumptions. Through research at Cambridge University, in the United Kingdom, they mention that Christopher Columbus descended out of Genoa, then went to reside in Europe, Spain, where he did his work that we all know. This is where he wrote and spoke in Spanish. Remains of Christopher Columbus was found in Seville Cathedral, Spain. Some bones were buried in Santo Domingo Cathedral in the Dominican Republic. To confirm, these bones have been checked and rechecked. Cambridge University go on to say that Christopher Columbus died in 1506, and in 1637, the widow of Christopher Columbus's son, Diego, was allowed to take the bones of both her husband and Diego's dad, Christopher Columbus, to the Dominican Republic for burial in the cathedral. Let's get this straight, not everyone at Cambridge University was pleased to discover this truth, and learn about Christopher Columbus' true identity as a black man. Tony Sinelli, from Cambridge University, quoted out of surprise, "This isn't right, Christopher Columbus is not a black man. This is the only Italian day, meaning Columbus Day parade, we, probably Italians, haven't they, the black people, take it from us? We get no respect. Next thing you know they will be telling us the Chinese invented pasta." Cambridge University further quote that after having the Columbus Day parade announced, the Grand Marshal of the parade, Maria Bartiromo, was replaced by singer Beyoncé. Not sure if this is true, but let's continue. Chief Walking Stick, a Navajo Indian, quoted, "Either way we got screwed. All aside, they say the original Columbus is a black man of African descent, who moved to settle in Europe, Spain. After leaving and being born in Genoa, Italy. The black Christopher Columbus wrote and spoke in Spanish most of his life with little work. What a shame." They feel appalled to learn that Christopher Columbus was a black man from their own research. But I still am not too sure, and I guess you guys aren't too, so let's move forward. In the comments let us know what you think of Cambridge University's research. Christopher Columbus, who is known to be a Portuguese or Spanish explorer, was born in Genoa, Italy. History of what we know today tells us Christopher Columbus is not a black man. I mean, why would he be black? Christopher Columbus did some very not nice things to black people during his missions, and now they want to make Christopher Columbus seem black, who did this to his own kind. I don't believe it, so we will stick with the white Christopher Columbus for now. Anyway, not much is known about Christopher Columbus' early life, which I'm not surprised, probably to cover up that he is a black man. I'm joking. Strangely, citing Christopher Columbus's statement of 1498 and archive documents from Genoa and Savona, it shows Christopher Columbus was born in Genoa to a Christian household. It's also been claimed he was a converted today's Jew, not the Israelite Jews who are black, or that Christopher Columbus was not born in Spain, Portugal or elsewhere mentioned. Christopher Columbus was the oldest son of a Genoan merchant worker, called Domenico Colombo. His wife was Susanna Fontanarassa. These are Christopher Columbus's parents, and his brother was Bartholomew. His career seemingly began as a seaman, in the Portuguese merchant marine. After a shipwreck in Cape St. Vincent of southwest Portugal in 1476, Christopher Columbus based himself in Lisbon with his brother Bartholomew. Both brothers employed as chart makers, but Christopher Columbus was principally a seagoing entrepreneur. Christopher Columbus sailed to Iceland and Ireland with the merchant marine. And in 1479, Christopher Columbus met and married Filipa Matas Perestrelo, a member of an impoverished noble Portuguese family. Christopher Columbus and his wife, Filipa, had a son in 1480, called Diego. Between 1482 and 1485, Christopher Columbus traded along Guinea and the Gold Coast of West Africa and made at least one voyage to the Portuguese fortress of São Jorge da Mina, which is Elmina, Ghana. Filipa, Christopher Columbus's wife, died in 1445. And Christopher Columbus remarried to Beatriz Enriqueta Arana, a Castilian mistress, by whom Christopher Columbus had a second son with, called Fernando, born in 1488. In 1484, Christopher Columbus began seeking support for an Atlantic crossing, from King John II of Portugal. But was denied any aid. By 1486, Christopher Columbus was firmly in Spain asking for patronage from King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. Christopher Columbus had at least 2 rejections. He last obtained royal support in January, 1492 through the interventions of a Spanish treasurer, Luis de Senil, and the Franciscan friars of La Rabida, with whom Christopher Columbus had stayed in the summer of 1499. Juan Perez of La Rabida had been one of the Queen confessors, and perhaps procured him the crucial audience. Which, being Christian missionary, anti-Islamic fervor, power of Castile and Aragon, the fear of Portugal, lust for gold, desire for adventure, hype of conquests, and Europe's need for a reliable supply of herbs and spices, for cooking, preserving and medicine, all combined to produce an explosion of energy that launched the first voyage. Christopher Columbus was present for the siege of Granada, which was the last Moorish, black people's stronghold to fall to Spain in January 1492. Christopher Columbus was riding back from Granada to La Rabida, when he was recalled to the Spanish court and the vital royal audience. Granada's fall had produced euphoria among Spanish Christians, encouraged triumph over the Islamic world. However, a direct assault, eastward could prove difficult, because the Ottoman Empire and other Islamic states had been gaining strength at a pace that was threatening the Christian monarchies. Islamic powers had closed lanes and routes to east, and the sea route, south from the Red Sea, was hard to access. Christopher Columbus recruited his crew by obtaining provision for 2 of his ships, by Spanish monarchs, from a small coastal town called Palos de la Frontera. Christopher Columbus relied on the help of 2 prominent seafaring families, and 2 other individuals called Martin Pinzon of Palos, and the family of one Nino, from Andalusia, a town of Mogar, Huelva, Spain. Together they all recruited around 90 men and boys for 3 vessels. Martin Pinzon assumed commander of the Pinta, first vessel. And Christopher Columbus was Nino, the second vessel, with whom Christopher Columbus had a close friendship with, and sailed as master of the Nina. Christopher Columbus used La Santa Maria, translating to Saint Mary, as his largest of the 3 ships in his first voyage across the Atlantic Ocean in 1492, and others were the Nina and Pinta. Juan de la Rosa, a black man, Basque, from Santona in Spain, was operating the Spanish waters. Requisitioned by order of Queen Isabella and by contract with Christopher Columbus, the Santa Maria became Christopher Columbus' flagship of the voyage, as long as it was afloat. We know that those who were with Christopher Columbus, who signed on for the epical trip, became primarily from towns and villages in Andalusia. Christopher Columbus was a foreigner, white man, and the others were Basque, black. Each ship had a master, a captain, a pilot, a surgeon, supported by the usual complements of able seamen and cabin boys. It was estimated over 300,000 Taino people, who are black, lived on Hispaniola in 1492. 16 years later the number reduced and dwindled down to 60,000 people. So by 1584, there were only around 500 remaining, according to Christopher Columbus' biographer, Lawrence Berggren. She quoted, "Many as 50,000 or more black people were killed, rather than for them to live the Spanish rule." Christopher Columbus is known to be labeled as a murderer and a person who committed genocide. Chris Lane, a historian of colonial Latin America, states she sees Christopher Columbus as someone who rounded up and sold natives as slaves, and was working some of the Taino, black people to death in the gold mines. There's a quote from Lawrence Berggren, where Michel de Curio, who participated in Christopher Columbus' second expedition to the Americas, states the following: "While Michel was in the boat, there was a beautiful black woman who, Lord Admiral Christopher Columbus gave to Michel. When Michel took the black girl to her cabin, the girl was naked as with Christopher Columbus' customs. Michel was filled with desire to take her pleasure with her and attempted to satisfy her own desire. Michel states she took a piece of rope and whipped the girl and that she let off some screaming noises, also that how Michel and the girl eventually came to terms." Along with the scenery, Christopher Columbus never tired of extolling the docility and peaceful nature of the timid black people who had welcomed Christopher Columbus and his fellow voyagers, with such awe and affection to their island Eden. Christopher Columbus kept turning over in his mind how the meek and artless character of his brown-skinned hosts could be made a source of profit. On the same day that the expedition landed on Guanahani, Christopher Columbus quotes that the timid natives should make good servants. Several weeks later he remarked in the journal, "They are very meek and without knowledge of evil, nor do they kill others or steal, and they are without weapons and so timid that one of our people can put 100 of them to flight." During the month of December, the Admiral Christopher Columbus assured the sovereigns that 10 men could cause 10,000 of the natives to flee, "so cowardly and faint-hearted are they, and they carry no arms except some rods at the end of which are pointed sticks which are fire-hardened." Christopher Columbus' ideas in that respect had taken definite form. He quotes, "They have no weapons and are all naked without any skill in arms, and are very cowardly so that 1,000 would not challenge 3," says the journal for that month. Christopher Columbus further goes on to quote, "Thus they are useful to be commanded, and to be made to labor, and so, and to do everything else of which there is need, and build towns and be taught to wear clothes and learn our customs." In a famous letter to Luis de Santangel, Christopher Columbus's patron at court, Christopher Columbus gets right down to business. In conclusion, to speak only of what has been accomplished on this voyage which was so hurried, their highnesses may see that Christopher Columbus can give them as much gold as they will need with very little aid from their highnesses. And there are spices and cotton, as much as their highnesses may order, and mastic in whatever quantity they may order, and slaves in any number they may order, and they shall be of the idolaters, meaning the heathens. Great evils are apt to have small beginnings, or, as Father Laws Causes put it, men are never accustomed to falling into a single error or committing only one sin. So it was that on November 1492, the Admiral Christopher Columbus ordered 5 young male natives, who had come trustingly aboard his flagship, forcibly seized to take to the sovereigns to learn our language, so that it might be disclosed what is in the land. At the time of Columbus's landing in the Americas, Frederick III was the Holy Roman Emperor. Though Spain was a loose part of the Holy Roman Empire, Frederick seems to have not paid it any attention. Frederick's son, Maximilian I, succeeded as Holy Roman Emperor, Maximilian I in 1459, 1519, and was Holy Roman Emperor from 1508 until his death. Frederick was never crowned by the Pope, as the journey to Rome was always too risky. Frederick was instead proclaimed emperor-elect by Pope Julius II at Trent, thus breaking the long tradition of requiring a papal coronation for the adoption of the imperial title. Maximilian was the son of Frederick III, Holy Roman Emperor, and Eleanor of Portugal. Maximilian ruled jointly with his father, Frederick, for the last 10 years of the latter's reign. From 1483 until his father's death in 1493. Maximilian expanded the influence of the House of Habsburg through war and his marriage in 1477, to Mary of Burgundy, the heiress to the Duchy of Burgundy, though Maximilian lost his family's original lands, in today's Switzerland, to the Swiss Confederacy. Through marriage of Maximilian's son, Philip the Handsome, to eventual Queen Joanna, of Castile in 1498, Maximilian helped to establish the Habsburg dynasty in Spain, which allowed his grandson Charles, Philip's son, to hold the thrones of both Castile and Aragon. Philip the Handsome, 1478-1506, Maximilian's son, was Duke of Burgundy from 1482 to 1506 and the first member of the House of Habsburg to be King of Castile. The son of Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I and Mary of Burgundy, Philip was less than 4 years old when his mother died, and upon her death, he inherited the Burgundian Netherlands. In 1496, Philip's father, Maximilian, arranged for him to marry Joanna, the second daughter of Queen Isabella I of Castile, and King Ferdinand II of Aragon. Around the same time, Philip's sister Margaret was given in marriage to Joanna's brother John, as part of an agreement between their fathers, Maximilian and Ferdinand. Within 4 years after the wedding, Joanna became heir presumptive to Aragon and Castile, following the deaths of her brother John, elder sister and infant nephew during that period. In 1504, aged 26, Philip became King Juri-Xaurus, when his mother-in-law died and Joanna succeeded her. He died only 2 years later, leaving his wife distraught with grief. Philip was the first Habsburg monarch in Spain, and is the progenitor of every later monarch of Spain, even up to today. He died before his father Maximilian, and therefore never inherited his father's territories or became Holy Roman Emperor. However, his son, Emperor Charles, eventually united the Habsburg, Burgundian, Castilian, and Aragon's inheritances. Philip holds a special place in Habsburg history because he was the pivot around which the dynasty acquired a large portion of its extensive lands. By inheriting the Burgundian Netherlands and acquiring much of Spain and its possessions in the New World, by marriage to Joanna, Philip is instrumental in vastly enhancing the territories of the Habsburgs, and his progeny would dominate European history for the next 2 centuries. Philip's wife Joanna was an elder sister to Catherine of Aragon, who married successively the brothers Arthur, Prince of Wales, and King Henry the Height of England. Philip did once visit England, and the young Prince Henry was much impressed with him. Indeed, Henry is said to have regarded Philip as providing a model of leadership towards which he aspired. I don't know why they called Philip handsome. The peoples thought he had a hideously pragmatic jaw. The Habsburgs were famous for it, apparently. See the coin below. The Habsburg jaw, from Smithsonian Magazine. New research finds correlation between how inbred rulers of a notoriously intermarrying dynasty were, and the prominence of den jutting jaw, and other inherited traits. The family tree of the Habsburgs, a German-Austrian ruling family whose domain stretched from Portugal to Transylvania, is a tangled one. Like many royal families, the Habsburgs made strategic marriages to consolidate their power, often to close relatives. And while the dynasty's regalia was glittery and their palaces splendid, the royals themselves were markedly less easy on the eyes. Generation after generation, Habsburg monarchs had sharply jutting jaws, bulbous lower lips and long noses. Their distinctive Habsburg jaw, a new analysis published in the Annals of Human Biology finds, most likely resulted from inbreeding. The worst of the Habsburgs' jaw was Charles II of Spain, in 1661 to 1700. He was the last Habsburg ruler of the Spanish Empire. He is remembered for his physical disabilities. It is said that Charles II could hardly chew his food and his speech was nearly unintelligible and that he drooled. So, Christopher Columbus cut his deals with King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Isabel of Castile. Ferdinand had a role in inaugurating the first European encounters in the future Americas, since he and Isabella sponsored the first voyage of Christopher Columbus in 1492. That year was the final victory in the war with Granada, which defeated the last Muslim state in Iberia and all of Western Europe. This brought to a close the centuries-long Christian reconquest of Iberia. For that Christian victory, Pope Alexander VI, born in the Kingdom of Valencia, awarded the royal couple the title of Catholic monarchs. At Ferdinand's death, Joanna's son, Ferdinand's grandson, Charles I, became ruler of all the several Iberian kingdoms except for Portugal. Ferdinand is often considered the first king of Spain, by virtue of his marriage to Isabella I of Castile, up to her death in 1504, followed by his regency of Castile and the name of his daughter Joanna, known as Queen of Castile as opposed to Ferdinand King of Spain. Now back to our main mission, finding out if Christopher Columbus is black? Clearly blacks still ruled places in Christopher Columbus's time, and Europe was still covered with black people. But with Asia being emptied of by the Mongols, and then the Turk victory over the last of the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantine, allowing the last remaining Dravidians of Asia to cross over to Europe, blacks had to be greatly outnumbered in Europe at that time, by tens of millions? What do you think? So numerically, so far I haven't found a way to tell if Columbus was a black explorer. Likewise, we know nothing about the race of Christopher Columbus's parents, which appear to be a dead end, which is strange. Cautiously, I did some digging and found that Christopher Columbus's parents were Domenico Colombo and Susanna Fontana Rasa. As a result of Columbus's criminality, crime as a function of the white people's rule evolved. We know that the Englishmen, white people, are responsible for the murder of 90 million or more people, who have indigenous black African descent. But worse yet, Christopher Columbus and the English whites, pernicious influence has persisted over the last 500 years. The fruits of their efforts to convince ignorant and docile people that white people are a sign of power and superiority. Of course, the purpose of this system is to allow minority whites to rule over and enrich themselves at the expense of the unintelligent colored masses. And of course, as unintelligent masses, black people, do everywhere, the exploited masses in the Americas turn to feeding on each other to survive, instead of finding ways to address the inequities in their own countries. Unfortunately, the whites have developed devastating methods of keeping black people down and in a constant state of commotion and disarray. Sometimes the whites do it by impoverishing black nations, but most often, the whites use the mulattoes, the black people, they created during their time of occupation, thusly, taking the Turks as example. The Ottoman Empire lasted from 1299 AD to 1924 AD. By the time the Ottoman Empire was disbanded after World War I, the Turks had installed Turks, and later their mulattoes, the black peoples, as rulers in all of the nations of North Africa and the Middle East. However, the original black people and the darker mulattoes are still there, albeit in smaller numbers. As a consequence, the entire region is in a constant state of war and upheaval. Another cute trick of the Turks was to use religion as a way to augment their disarray campaigns. After the Turks usurped control of Islam in 1055, it likely didn't take them long to start inserting all of those hatred of black people passages in Islamic religious books. Interesting, right? Carrying on. Christopher Columbus traveled around the Atlantic Ocean, Europe, and Caribbean, America and South America. Also, Ghana, Bahamas, Cuba, Hispaniola, Guanahani, the British Isles, around the Western Sea to the East Indies, Castile, and Trinidad. All these places he visited during his 3 voyages to the Americas. 1. Exploring the Lesser Antilles in 1493. 2. Trinidad and the northern coast of South America in 1498, and lastly, the eastern coast of Central America in 1502. Many of the names he gave to geographical features, particularly islands, are still in use. He also gave the name Indies, Indians, to the indigenous peoples he encountered. As a colonial governor, Columbus was accused by his contemporaries of significant brutality and was soon removed from the post. Columbus's strained relationship with the Crown of Castile and its appointed colonial administrators in America led to his arrest and removal from Hispaniola in 1500, and later to protracted litigation over the perquisites that he and his heirs claimed were owed to them by the Crown. Columbus's expeditions inaugurated a period of exploration, conquest, and colonization that lasted for centuries, thus bringing the Americas into the European sphere of influence. Columbus was widely celebrated in the centuries after his death, but public perception has fractured in the 21st century as scholars have given greater attention to the harms committed under his governance, particularly the beginning of the depopulation of Hispaniola's indigenous Taino caused by mistreatment and Old World diseases, as well as by that people's enslavement. Many places in the Western Hemisphere bear his name, including the country of Colombia, the District of Columbia, and British Columbia. Well, I'm reaching the end of our video and I haven't seemed to find any evidence proving Cambridge's research, showing us that Columbus was a black man, other than one picture showing Columbus as a black man, but this apparently was painted like that on purpose. The painter of the Black Columbus, author Michael, liked his paintings being dark. So, I guess for now we have to stick with the white Christopher Columbus. This may all be a lot to take in, but we thank you for watching and sticking to the end of our video. We hope you have learned something informative and historic. Please click the notification bell so that you can be updated with our videos regularly. Thank you and goodbye. Until next time.